Welcome everyone back to the channel and another podcast. My name is Paul. I'm a very happy member of CA and I'm absolutely delighted to have been joined by Jenny.
Hi Paul, I'm Jenny. I'm from Ipswich in Suffolk, a grateful recovered addict.
Hey Jenny. And Ashley.
Yeah, hi Paul, thanks for having me. Yeah, I'm Ashley, I'm a recovered drug addict, thank you.
Good stuff, thanks Ashley. And Elizabeth. Are you there, Elizabeth? Okay, well, glad you're here, Elizabeth. Okay, so
sorry, I couldn't take my microphone off mute. My name's Elizabeth. I'm a grateful recovering alcoholic addict, and I'm from London, Chelsea. Thank you.
Thanks for being here with us today. So what we're going to do is we've each brought a topic or two from the big book. We're each going to share on our topic, read our bit from the literature and then share on it, and then we're all going to go around and share back on what the other persons have talked about. So first off, I just want to give a shout out to anyone that's still struggling with drug addiction and mention the channel. There's now around 55 podcasts on this channel. There's 14 on each of the 12 steps. We've got 2 on step 1 and 2 on step 2. There's about 15 personal stories on the channel. There's a podcast on the entire psychic change, the spiritual malady. There's another one on the ABCs of addiction, and various other podcasts. And this is the 4th of this format of a broadcast. So please check those out. Stay connected. Further on, we'll put up information about meetings, online and face-to-face. So reach out, and wherever you see this posted on in the rooms or Skype or WhatsApp or YouTube, if you want to get involved in the conversation, please do so. So once again, I'm really pleased and thankful that you've all come along today. And without further ado, Jenny, it is over to you.
Thank you, Paul. Oh, and I've chosen how it works. Chapter 5, page 58, and it reads, "Rarely have we seen a person fail who's thoroughly followed our path. Those who do not recover are people who cannot or will not completely give themselves to this simple program. Usually men and women who are constitutionally incapable of being honest with themselves. They are such unfortunates. They are not at fault. They seem to have been born that way. They are naturally incapable of grasping and developing a manner of living which demands rigorous honesty. Their chances are less than average. There are those too who suffer from grave emotional and mental disorders, but many of them do recover if they have the capacity to be honest. Our stories disclose in a general way what it used to be like, what happened, and what we are like now. If you've decided that you want what we have and are willing to go to any lengths to get it, then you're ready to take certain steps." I mean, the reason I chose this reading was, 1, it's my favorite chapter, but 2, it tells us exactly, tells us several things. 1, that honesty is the core principle of this program. Now, when I first came in, I'd been a drug addict for 30-something years, and so I was incapable of being honest with myself or with anybody else. And you need to be honest to get this program. And it tells us that as long as a person has the capacity to be honest, that they have the ability to get this simple program. It even mentions those who have dual problems like mental disorders, that they too have the capacity to get this program as long as they have the capacity to be honest with themselves. So that's why I chose this, because it's very important to me as I come through this program, as I worked my 12 steps, that I learned how to be honest both with myself and with other people. And it's been difficult, and I've not got it right all the time. I mean, there's been a couple of occasions where I've told a lie, I've been caught out and had to make a step 10 apology, and start again. But it's just one of those things that I now work an honest program. I'm honest with myself, I'm honest with other people. And I find that it's the more I am honest with myself and with other people, the easier it gets. I mean, my son still checks when I tell him something, but you know, he's 27 and has had 27 years of me being a dishonest person, and 9 months of being clean is not going to sort of fix 27 years of dishonesty and manipulation. So yeah, I shall leave it there. So thank you, Paul.
Brilliant. Always great to hear you, Jenny. Thanks for sharing. Good stuff. Ashley, come on in.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. Thanks, Jenny. Thanks for the reading. Yeah, I'm Ashley. I'm a recovered drug addict. Yeah, chapter 5, how it works. You know, coming into the rooms and listening to what people have to say around this, and you know, listening to a newcomer. Listening as a newcomer around that chapter. And you know, I just want to say welcome to any newcomers or anyone that is struggling around this, you know, this illness of, you know, addiction, and you know, wants to seek a way out. You know, that's been my experience. I just wanted to seek a way out of this, you know, crazy situation that, you know, us drug addicts get into. But yeah, you know, rarely have we seen, you know, what I related to there was, you know, when I came into this and I started looking at this, and it says at the top there, it says what Jenny read, rarely have we seen a person fail who has thoroughly followed our path. And those two sentences from, you know, it gave me a bit of encouragement, really, because I was reading this and I thought, you know, that's something really kind of really inspiring to listen to that somebody say, you know, rarely have we seen a person fail who's thoroughly followed our path. And I suppose when I actually kind of got that was, I was at a place where I just wanted to look at things differently, and I just put my hands up, and I I'd had enough, and somebody just put their hand out to me, and I just wanted some help. And that's just been my experience within this. And you know, from what I can gather from what's been spoken about is that it's kind of given us some insight around you know, what we can do going forward, and looking at, you know, 1 to 12 and getting an idea of what we can potentially work towards, and you know, tapping into this power and being restored to sanity over that insane idea. And that's just been my experience, and constantly thinking of others and helping others, and you know, getting into some sort of book reading with others, you know, calling some newcomers, calling people in recovery, and getting into a meeting or two, and you know, just showing somebody else these things, and you know, watching other people recover is pretty cool, because you know, I just wanted to stop and I couldn't stop. And you know, I was lucky enough that somebody showed me their, you know, failed attempts to stop using, and I just I'm grateful that I can take somebody through the work now and show them, you know, my experience and, you know, what the book tells us to do. But yeah, I'll leave it there. Nice one, thank you.
Thanks for sharing, Ashley. Great to hear you. Elizabeth, come on in.
Good evening, everyone. My name's Elizabeth, and I'm a grateful recovering addict. How it works, I absolutely love this chapter. And I remember when I first came into recovery, and I came into a meeting, and I had just come out of an institution, and I saw the steps on the wall, you know, on a you know, hanging up. And I saw, here are the steps we took, which are suggested as a program of recovery and how it works. And I tell you what, none of it made any sense to me when I first saw it. You know, it's like someone was speaking in a different language. I couldn't understand. But there was one thing that I did see, and you know, and it said, rarely has a person failed. Rarely have we seen a person fail who's thoroughly followed our path. And I thought, gosh, I've got no other path to go down. You know, at that point, I didn't have anywhere else to go. And it was the last thing that I tried. And it was the first thing that worked. You know, I tried every other ways and means of trying to give up drink and drugs after being out there for 30 years. Started at the age of 11 and finished at the age of 42. When I looked at this and I saw, and I beg your pardon, sorry about that. When I looked at this and I saw step 1, we admitted that we were powerless over alcohol and that our lives had become unmanageable. For me, that was what I needed to do. I needed to concede to my innermost self that I was powerless, that I'd lost I'd lost the choice of whether or not I picked up that drink or that drug daily. That choice had been taken away from me. And with or without drink or drugs, my life was unmanageable. My emotions were unmanageable. And at that point, I never realized that I had an illness that centered in my mind. I thought that it was the drink and the drugs that was the problem. I never realized that it was me. And working through these steps and learning how it worked and learning that I needed to find a power that was greater than myself to hand my life and my will over on a daily basis. And to know that I didn't have to do it alone anymore. And, all those times that, my family and everyone tried to get me to stop, there was nothing that was going to make me stop apart from finding a power that was greater than myself. I'm going to leave it there, but thank you ever so much, Paul, for inviting me today.
Thank you so much for sharing, Elizabeth. Thank you. It's a great bit of the book. Thanks very much, Jenny, for sharing that with us. And, Bill was once asked if there's any part of the book that he would change. And he said this, he would change it to never have we seen anyone fail that has thoroughly followed our path. Never. That's the one bit he said he would have changed. And yeah, that has been my experience too. The persons that have taken the suggestions, and I've recently given those same set of suggestions to 2 folk in the last 4 or 5 days. If you use drugs daily, it's a good idea to do a meeting daily. Particularly in early recovery, it's a good idea to read a couple of pages of this book, or basic text, Alcoholics Anonymous, often called the Big Book, every day. It's a good idea to have your own personal spiritual literature and systematically study that every day. Consistent step work, timely, consistent step work with a sponsor. It's a good idea to keep an eye on your speech and your behavior. It's a good idea to build and maintain a support network of half a dozen folks, usually of the same sex, and remain in contact with them. Care about their sobriety and they'll care about yours. It's a good idea to pray. More prayer, more power. Less prayer, less power. The more I pray, the happier I am. And the freer I am. It doesn't mean that drama and circumstance and feelings don't happen. They do. But my discovery has been the things that happen when I pray are better than the things that happen when I don't pray. Who knew? And it really is a great bit of the book. And it's been my experience that everyone that takes those simple suggestions, I may have missed out 1 or 2, but those suggestions, I have them written down. Everyone that I've seen do those suggestions, get a home group, online home group, and a face-to-face home group, share every other day, even if it's just for a couple of minutes, has stayed clean, and many of the consequences that they've got have either improved or lessened. Not everything can be healed, but healing does come in as we approach God, and the program gives persons a simple way to connect with God. And it says there are those that are naturally incapable of grasping and developing a manner of living which demands rigorous honesty. And living clean is much more than being drug free. My experience has been those that live clean are more likely to remain clean, which sounds a bit cryptic, but those that keep an eye on their thoughts, their behavior and their speech usually have long-term sobriety. And I'll leave it there as well. Thanks so much, Jenny. So let me see, Ashley, what have you got for us today?
Yeah, no problems, Paul. I've got chapter 11, A Vision for You. So I'll start reading that. But yeah, I'm a recovered drug addict. So I'll start, chapter 11, A Vision for You. So at the top it says, for most normal folks, drinking means conviviality, companionship, and colourful imagination. It means release from care, boredom, and worry. It is joyous intimacy with friends and a feeling that life is good, but not so with us. In those last days of heavy drinking, the old pleasures were gone. They were but memories. Never could we recapture the great moments of the past. There was an insistent yearning to enjoy life as we once did, and that heartbreaking obsession that some miracle of control would enable us to do it. There was always one more attempt and one more failure. The less people tolerated us, the more we withdrew from society, from life itself. As we became subjects of King Alcohol, the shivering denizens of his mad realm, the chilling vapor that is loneliness settled down. It thickened, ever becoming blacker. Some of us sought our sordid places, hoping to find understanding, companionship, and approval. Momentarily, we did. Then would come oblivion and the awful awakening to face the hideous four horsemen: terror, bewilderment, frustration, despair. Unhappy drinkers who read this page will understand now and then. A serious drinker, being dry at moments, says, I don't miss it at all. Feel better, work better, having a better time. As ex-problem drinkers, we smile at such a sally. We know our friend is like a boy whistling in the dark to keep up his spirits. He fools himself inwardly. He would give anything to take half a dozen drinks and get away with them. He will presently try the old game again, for he isn't happy about his sobriety. He cannot picture life without alcohol. Someday he will be unable to imagine life either without alcohol or with it. Then he will know loneliness such as few do. He will be at the jumping off place. He will wish for the end. We have shown how we got out from under. You say, yes, I'm willing, but am I to be consigned to a life where I shall be stupid, boring, and glum? Like some of the righteous people I see, I know I must get along without liquor, but how can I? Have you sufficient substitute? Yes, there is a substitute, and it is vastly more than that. It is a fellowship in Alcoholics Anonymous. There you will find release from care, boredom, and worry. Your imagination will be fired. Life will mean something at last. The most satisfactory years of your existence lie ahead. Thus we find the fellowship, and so will you. I'll leave it there, Paul.
Brilliant. Ashley, would you like to share on that for a minute or two?
I'll share on that. So yeah, thanks again for letting me read. And yeah, I'm a recovered drug addict, and thanks for everyone else that's read today. Chapter 11, A Vision for You. I always like to start off by saying, when I do read stuff out of the book, and I just like to kind of make a point of, my experience within these, particular readings that I was reading out. And because I came into this program, truthfully, because I can't, vision for you. It's given me this vision for me, it means that I've got this kind of vision that I can work towards. And, everything else in my life I can control. I've got some kind of normality, I suppose, around it. But when it comes to anything to do with alcohol, drugs, and all that sort of stuff, I knew I was in a bit of trouble, and that's why I ended up in Cocaine Anonymous and wanted to, really kind of get into this and get an understanding of what it is that goes on for me, and why is it that this keeps happening to me, even though I keep swearing off that I'm never doing it again. But yet, as soon as that thought's there for me, I'm kind of off. I really want to stop, and I really mean it, but I just can't. So when I started reading A Vision for You, where it says most normal folks, drinking means conviviality, companionship, and colourful imagination, I suppose I had to really look at that and think, do I drink and does it look cool? And can I just have one or two and leave it alone? And and am I all right with that? And I started to look at that, and I started to realize that really isn't my story, because I'm not really happy with my, I'm not really happy around just having the one or the two, but that's probably by the by. But and where it says, it means release from care, boredom and worry. It's joyous intimacy with friends and feeling that life is good. I mean, not, like it says, not so with us. And that's been my experience, that I'm not really excited around, all this drinking malarkey and all the, the illusion that this is fun. And this is why, I'm in a program to, restore that thinking, because that's ultimately why I'm here. My thinking's this, it's not right. And this is why the CA fellowship helps, drug addicts of the hopeless variety like myself to restore that thinking into some kind of normality. But this chapter is very, it's very got some really good things that stuck out to me that I just read. But yeah, I mean, I'm pretty grateful that I'm in recovery and I'm able to share with people that are potentially listening to this podcast. But yeah, I'll leave it there, Paul. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thanks, Ashley. Great to hear you. Elizabeth, come on in.
Elizabeth, alcoholic addict. So a vision for you. I mean, what was my vision of life? 30 years of taking drugs and alcohol, whatever I could take, as much as I could take. I didn't have an off button. I didn't know when to stop. Once I put something into me, literally, it was when I either fell and I couldn't take any more, or there was no money, or there was no means to get any more drugs or alcohol. When they said to me, when I came into the rooms, I initially came into AA because I didn't know about CA, and then I went on to CA, and I know we use the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. When people said to me, Elizabeth, it drove me absolutely crazy. You can have a life beyond your wildest dreams. I could not see, and I did not know what my life of my wildest dreams would be. I'd used drugs and alcohol from such a young age that I didn't know me. I didn't know what feelings were. I didn't know what life was to be normal. I didn't know what it was. I just didn't know. So when it says here that, the 4 horsemen, terror, bewilderment, frustration, despair, unhappy drinkers who read this page will understand. The last 2 years of my using, I spent in my house, in my bed, in my head. I thought that I had mental health issues. I was anxious. I was worried. I was scared. I do have mental health issues. They are a separate issue entirely. But my drugs and my alcohol certainly wasn't making those issues any better. When I came into the rooms, I thought, how on earth am I ever going to live without alcohol? How am I ever going to live without a substance in my body? And that life beyond my wildest dreams, really at that moment, was just to spend a night in bed, to be able to sleep properly, not intoxicated. It was to be able to feel peace and serenity. And when I say peace and serenity, I mean no fear, no worry, no feeling like I've got a 20-stone man on my chest, waking up thinking, what have I done? Where have I been? Who have I hurt? And what harm have I caused? I just wanted to be able to go to bed as a normal person and wake up in the morning without that terror and fear on top of me, And when I look at a vision for you, and it tells me that, by going through the 12 steps of recovery, that I can have that life beyond my wildest dreams, that materialistic things to me don't mean that much anymore. That I just wanted peace. I just wanted that peace. Going through the 12 steps of recovery have enabled me to change the way that I think, to change the way that I look at others, to change the way that I act, to be able to pause when I'm agitated, to be able to respond instead of reacting. Today I feel like I've been given a second chance at life. I've been reborn. And that's not in the religious sense. I've been reborn. I feel like I'm having another life, and I'm able to look through different eyes with clarity. And that is just so amazing for someone that's been, you know, taking substances for over 30 years. There is a life, you know, there is a beautiful life to be had going through the steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I'm going to leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth. Yeah. It interests me, you know, where it says about some new miracle of control, and then further down about a serious drinker that manages to stay sober for a little while and thinks through self-control that they can manage to do it, and some persons do, often for a period of time. And you know, it says in the doctor's opinion, a form of moral psychology, you know, and I believe the missing ingredient is the power, you know, the power of the Creator. You know, God gives power and empowers us to well, you know, to live responsibly. You know what I mean? I think it's a threefold problem. Separation from God gives me wrong thinking, which gives me wrong living. You know, connection with God through this process gives me right thinking and right living, and the change happens as I stay sober and put in the work. You know, for many of us, when we're using initially, when we're younger, you know, friends are there, the music's playing, you know, we've got vehicles, jobs, and everything's going great, our health and our sanity. But many of us end up on our own with the doors locked, the curtains closed, and we're living to use, using to live. An addict is someone whose whole life and thinking is centered in drugs, ways, and means to get more. We live to use and we use to live. And you know, what's ironic here is that drinking and using gave us release from care, boredom, and worry. Working a program of action, you know, delivers us from being worrisome and bored. You know, and it's always the next right thing. A rolling stone gathers no moss. Move a muscle, change a thought. Who can I ring? You know, and when the books are opened, and the books will be opened, what have I done today? You know what I mean? It's not necessarily what I've thought or what I've said, but what have I done? You know, and have I done anything for others? And so it's a total change from self-centeredness, you know, where all the money, instead of going on the mortgage or the car or the insurance, you know, is going in a spoon or on a pipe or on the foil. It's the total transformation where we start to care about others. You know, we start to live in what we call the solution. And yeah, you know, and you know, on a basis of honesty, I often wonder if there's some lurking notion, you know what I mean? Is there a tiny part of Paul that says maybe one day, you know? And that's where staying connected and listening in meetings comes in, because you do hear folks say, you know, that with years clean, that sometimes, you know, the thought may come along, and, you know, the old adage is, you know, you can't stop birds flying overhead or crapping in your hair, but you can stop them building a nest. So the thoughts may come, but you don't have to act on those thoughts. You really don't, you know. And by listening in meetings and staying close to God, you know, we experience what we call recovery. And of course, this is a great bit of the book, Ashley. The Four Horsemen: terror, bewilderment, frustration, and despair. You know, I was talking with one such person earlier this afternoon, you know, and listening to that despair. And so another friend of mine is currently in detox, and they've just caught COVID as well, apparently. So they're having to isolate in detox. And, you know, it's an awful place to be in that cycle of addiction that Joe and Charlie so astutely talk about, you know, where self-medication is our solution. You know, and I said to this person this afternoon, it's your solution. You know, that's what you do. You know, medicating feelings. You know, anyway, I shall leave it there. Jenny, come on in.
Thank you, Paul. Yeah, I mean, I also love this chapter. I love all the big book, but when I got to this chapter in the big book, and read about the Four Horsemen, as Catherine said before, and you mentioned, I definitely identified with that. I mean, many a times after a use up, I think, God, what have I just done? I've just spent my rent money, or I've just spent my council tax money, or I've just spent my electricity or gas money. And time again, it happened. And I think, you know, one more attempt, one more failure. And that was definitely me. It was the less people tolerated me, the more I withdrew from life itself, as it says in the book. I mean, for me, it wasn't alcohol, it was definitely drugs. But we all come in for different reasons. But it doesn't matter whether you're an alcoholic or whether you're a drug addict. This book definitely relates to both addictions. And addiction is addiction at the end of the day. I mean, when I'd have periods of sobriety, and I'd say to myself, yeah, I don't miss it. I'm clean. It's all very well and good. I've got this. But inevitably, I didn't have it, and it'd be yet another failure, and that'd be me off and running again. But you know, this chapter just helped me to realize that I'm not alone. I'm not alone in the way I was feeling or thinking. That other people were feeling exactly the same as what I was, and this book was written such a long time ago. And I got to this and I'd be like, how come they know how I was feeling? Because it just amazes me in all the chapters of the big book, you know, how does the book know me so well when I don't know me so well? You know, I mean, 30 something years of drug abuse, and I didn't know me at all. Yet there was this book that's written nearly 100 years ago that knows me to the T, and it's just astonishing to me. And yeah, I shall just leave it at that. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thanks, Jenny. Great to hear you. Thank you. Okay, over to you, Elizabeth.
Hi there, Elizabeth Addick. So I'm going to read from the doctor's opinion, page XXB11. So the subject presented in this book seems to be of a paramount importance to those afflicted with alcoholic addiction. I say this after many years' experience as a medical director of one of the oldest hospitals in the country, treating alcoholic and drug addiction. There was therefore a sense of real satisfaction when I was asked to contribute a few words of subject which is covered in such masterly detail in these pages. We doctors have realised for a long time that some form of moral psychology was of urgent importance to alcoholics, but its application presented difficulties beyond our conception. What with our ultra-modern standards, our scientific approach to everything, we are perhaps not well equipped to apply the powers of good that lie outside our synthetic knowledge. Many years ago, one of the leading contributors to this book came under our care in this hospital, and while here, he acquired some ideas which he put into practical application at once. Later, he requested the privilege of being allowed to tell his story to other patients here, and with some misgiving, we consented. The cases which have followed, though, have been most interesting. In fact, many of them are amazing. The unselfishness of these men, as we have come to know them, the entire absence of the profit motive, and their community spirit is indeed inspiring to one who has laboured long and wearily in this alcoholic field. They believe in themselves, and still more in the power which pulls chronic alcoholics back from the gates of death. Of course, an alcoholic ought to be freed from his physical craving for liquor, and this often requires a definite hospital procedure before psychological measures can be of maximum benefit. We believe, and so suggested a few years ago, that the action of alcohol on these chronic alcoholics is a manifestation of an allergy, that the phenomenon of craving is limited to this class and never occurs in the average temperate drinker. These allergic types can never safely use alcohol in any form at all. And once having formed the habit and found they cannot break it, once having lost their self-confidence, their reliance upon things human, their problems pile up on them and become astonishingly difficult to solve. Frothy emotional appeal seldom suffices. this message, which can interest and hold these alcoholic people, must have depth and weight. And in nearly all cases, their ideals must be grounded in a power greater than themselves if they are to recreate their lives. Now, the reason this really I find so powerful, this actual, I mean, I love the big book, and every time I read it, it dances, and it's, you know, it's not like reading a book. It's just amazing, and it gives me such beauty every time I go through it with another woman. But what really stands out to me in this is that the bit where it says, we doctors have realized for some long time that some form of moral psychology was of urgent importance to alcoholics, but its application presented difficulties beyond our conception. With their ultra-modern standards and their scientific approach to everything, we are perhaps not well equipped to apply the powers of good that lie outside our synthetic knowledge. Now, this doctor is actually admitting that with everything that they have, you know, all the studies, all the scientific approach, everything that they have at their hands, everything that money can buy, everything that they're taught in the books, that actually they're having no impact upon the alcoholic. And the only way that any impact is ever made is by one alcoholic helping another. You know, in this book, it was wrote obviously in 1939, and it says, was it 35 or 39? I might be wrong there. You know, I'm still an addict and I'm still unmanageable. But, you know, that when someone had a wet brain, or there was an alcoholic that was being taken into hospital and detoxed, that they had to admit that so many of them were thrown into institutions because they just couldn't help them, because they didn't know what to do, because it lied outside their synthetic knowledge. They didn't know that only one alcoholic or one drug addict talking to another, they understood each other's mind and they understood how it worked. And that to me was just so powerful, and it impacts me so much to think that there's possibly today people that are still in institutions that were only put there because they were alcoholics or because they were drug addicts, and no one knew that they needed to find a power greater than themselves. You know, when they got clean, when they were detoxed, if they would have had these 12 steps, or when they did have these 12 steps, that moment of insanity, when it came on them to pick up that first drink, when, you know, we don't know how or why it comes on us, because we're walking into that bar sober, or we're walking into that crack house, you know, sober. Why do we do it? You know, if we've got that power greater than us, and we're spiritually connected, because it's not a religious program, that moment of insanity, we're quickly restored to sanity. And the Oxford groups of the day, you know, were trying to promote that when they were walking around the streets to those alcoholics and those addicts that were sitting on the, you know, sitting there, that didn't know what was wrong with them. Did not know what was wrong with them. I just think it's so extremely powerful. And just to, you know, it says frothy emotional appeal seldom suffices. You know, I've got two beautiful sons. No matter how many times they said to me, Mum, please don't go out that door, my love for them couldn't stop me. Nothing could stop me. And the only thing that could stop me was working the 12 steps of recovery. And I believe that AA brought me to God, and God brought me to AA. And I believe that, you know, my God of my understanding today enables me to have a God conscience, so that when it kicks in for me to want to pick up a drink or a drug, I'm restored to sanity. I love the doctor's opinion. It really interests me, the way that they thought and how they admitted, or that top doctor admitted, that it lied outside their synthetic knowledge. And that's why they allowed the privilege of being allowed to tell the story of, you know, one man talking to another who was one alcoholic to another. I'll leave it there. Thank you ever so much.
Brilliant. Thanks so much, Elizabeth. Yeah, it's a great bit of the book. You know, and understanding one's own alcoholism is very empowering. You know, I think step one is one of the hardest steps, if not the hardest step to do properly. You know, I understand why in Narcotics Anonymous they spend over 4 weeks on step one. I also understand why some of the folks in recovery think coming along to a meeting step one. However, the reality is, if you're going to be taking folk through the steps, you need to be crystal clear how you're going to take someone through step one. And it's a matter of utmost importance. For me, it's about 1 3/4, 2 hours on the phone in 3 or 4 separate calls. I find 40 minutes is more than enough for a sponsorship call myself. For a couple of reasons, knowledge retention and person schedules. And then a couple of hours of their personal homework, for want of a better term, reading step one out of the 12 and 12. The first 43 pages of the big book are largely about step one. And also checking out the step one podcasts that are on this channel, indeed. And also I send out questions for step 1, 2, and 3. It's about a dozen questions for each. So, I think step one is very, very important. I think it's about transparency and accountability. Also a consequences list is a vital part of step one, I believe. And, this is what it's all about, really, God's power. And it says there, they believe in themselves and still more in the power which pulls chronic alcoholics back from the gates of death. And, my heart, as you were sharing, Elizabeth, my heart went back to a friend of mine who I've known for 2 years now, something like that. And this person rang me up half dead at the end of last year. They couldn't walk, their mind was going, they were hallucinating. Terrible state, and we had 2 or 3 false starts. We get as far as step 2 or 3, then they would vanish, as I call it, not keep an appointment and not answering the phone, and you've just got to wait until they get in touch, and anyway, eventually we managed to complete a thorough full round of the 12 steps, and they've been continuously sober all of this year, but there's no doubt about it, they would be dead were it not for God's power and this simple process. So thanks so much for bringing this portion of the book. And there's like a concession, and medical science has still not found a treatment, for alcoholism. And it talks there about practical application of these ideas. And they would talk in terms of a treatment for alcoholism. And it's completely altruistic. I've known persons that I've spoke to that were about to spend thousands in rehabs. They've come along to 12-step meetings and gotten and stayed clean without spending a penny. That's the miracle of recovery. And what's on offer here is a transformed life. It really, really is. And the problem we have is an obsession of the mind. We have an obsession of the mind that tells us that feeling of ease and comfort from that pipe, that spoon, that bong, or that foil, or that spliff is just the thing. But the problem is we want it all the time. You see, that we cannot use successfully. That ship has sailed, So what I really have is a commitment to abstinence in the power of God, the power of the Creator. And I have to do simple things to maintain a fit spiritual condition. So I have a daily reprieve on that basis. We know the phenomenon of craving, and then of course we have a body that, although the mind will convince us it's just one, the body says there's no way you're just having that one. You'd better get on that phone and organize some more. And if you've no money, you'd better get some money to organize some more. And that is the problem we have, an obsession of the mind and a compulsion of the body. And as I say, in my opinion, it's a threefold problem: spiritual separation from God, mental resulting in wrong thinking, resulting in wrong doing, wrong action. And the solution is connection with God, right thinking, right action, right living. So I'll leave it there. And Jenny, it's over to you.
Thank you, Paul. Sorry. Yeah, obviously, when I first came into the program, the doctor's opinion was the first part of the book that I was introduced to. It was the first chapter that my sponsor told me to read, and it helped me to come to some understanding of what I was actually suffering from. Like I said before, although my problem was not alcohol, it was drugs. I just substituted where it said alcoholism or alcohol. I just substituted the words with drug or drugs. And that helped me get through it. And it helped me understand that I suffered from this twofold illness of the mind and body, that the allergy created in me this need, once I put one in me, that I could not stop. And the allergy and the sorry, my cat's putting me off. I do apologize. Yeah, that once I put one in me, I really couldn't stop. And this chapter really helped me understand that. And it amazes me that how long ago this book was written, and yet, I mean, science has only just recently proved that alcoholism or addiction is actually an illness. And it amazes me that they knew back then, before science has actually proven it as a fact, that it was an illness. And it just amazes me that how this book is just amazing to me. I shall leave it on that. Thank you.
Thanks, Jenny. Ashley, come on in.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. Thanks, Jenny. Thanks, Elizabeth. Yeah, the doctor's opinion. Yeah, like everyone else, you know, coming into the rooms and, you know, or just, you know, getting a sponsor first of all, and letting him, you know, tell me what the doctor's opinion is and reading it to me. And, you know, my experience is that, you know, getting some bits from this and looking at step one is, for me, you know, for me is very experiential around, you know, those failed attempts to kind of look at this and really kind of sit down with someone and take this seriously, because I didn't do that for a very, very long time. And then when I kind of kept going back to the doctor's opinion, you know, I was very kind of ready just to, you know, take this on board and listen to what they had to say, rather than me kind of thinking that I know best, I know what to do, let me say what I need to say. You know, for some reason, I don't know what happened, but something just shifted around the way that I was being. And I don't know what it was. I think it was, like I said, when I was sharing earlier, I'm convinced that I just had to get to a place where I'd completely had enough. And I just wanted to know something different around the way that I originally was thinking around life, you know, taking and using substances. And this is what the doctor's opinion kind of brought to me around this, you know, step one experience when I got introduced to the chapter. And, you know, because ultimately, you know, when I do stop taking and using, you know, that's half the problem. But then the other problem is what I do and how I behave towards others in and around those periods when I do stop. And this is where I come unstuck all the time when I you know, when I do manage to kind of get a bit of clean time. I just really can't function with society properly, and I can't, yeah, there's something not there, and I just want to do everything and anything to get out of the way that I feel, and I want to use again, to be honest, when I'm in that mindset, you know, when I was in kind of that active, addictive mindset. But I think the point I'm trying to make is, you know, to anyone that's listening to this, that's, you know, new or that's been about, but that keeps struggling and relapsing or whatever, is that I couldn't stay stopped. And that was something that I looked at, and, you know, I can and will get clean. But the beauty of me applying myself to this is that there is some permanent sobriety that we can achieve within this process. I mean, this has been my experience, you know, and taking that to somebody else that's desperate enough and that wants to seek a way out as much as I did. But, you know, that's, you know, and that the doctor's opinion is, you know, is describing the alcoholism and that, you know, all these, and I think it's a very in-depth chapter. It goes on you know, to say like that there was a patient and in 1934, and that there was quite a lot of things in there that I struggled to kind of take in, but it is, you know, it's a very sort of standout part of the book. But yeah, I'll leave it there, Paul. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thanks, Ashley. So I want to read a little bit from page 23, family. If I can just figure out the technical side of things here. Wait a minute. So it's page 23 in There Is a Solution. There it is. And it's down at the bottom of the page where it says the tragic truth. There it is. So the tragic truth is that if the man or the woman be a real alcoholic addict, you're a real alcoholic addict, the happy day may not arrive. They have lost control. At a certain point in the drinking of every alcoholic, he or she passes into a state where the most powerful desire to stop drinking is of absolutely no avail. The tragic situation has already arrived in practically every case, long before it's suspected. The fact is that most alcoholics, for reasons yet obscure, have lost the power of choice in drink. Our so-called willpower becomes practically non-existent. We're unable at certain times to bring into our consciousness with sufficient force the memory of the suffering and humiliation of even a week or a month ago. We are without defense against the first drink. And then further down, the almost, wait a minute, you know, where are we here? Well, there it is. Further down, it says the old threadbare idea that this time we shall handle ourselves like other folk, a complete failure of the kind of defense that keeps one from putting his hand on a hot stove. And then over to page 35. See here. There it is. So we shall describe some of the mental states that precede a relapse into drinking and drugging. But obviously, this is the crux of the problem. What sort of thinking dominates an alcoholic addict who repeats time after time the desperate experiment of the first drink or drug? Friends who have reasoned with him after a spree which has brought him to the point of divorce or bankruptcy are mystified when he walks directly into a saloon. Why does he? What is he thinking? And I just want to talk briefly about that. It's a very complex point, the peculiar mental twist, the mental reasoning before the first drink or drug. You know, and I believe that we let up on our daily program of action sometime before we pick up the drink or the drug. You know, we perhaps ease off on regular prayer. We ease up on regular meditation. We ease up on meetings. We ease up on working with a sponsor. We ease up with our daily reading of the literature. We quit building a relationship with God. We don't enlarge our spiritual journey. You know, when I look back, and crucially, we stop working with others, or we reduce our contact with other folks in sobriety. And, you know, back in the late 30s, and you were right, by the way, Elizabeth, it was 1939 it was published, but before it was published, AA was started in 1935. For them few years, there's very few meetings. I don't think they'd finalised the exact 12 steps. The book hadn't been published. And they were persons of personal, private prayer and working with others. That was the two ingredients they did every day: worked with others and prayer, you know, and more prayer, more power, more prayer, more freedom. Now, when we let up on those elements, then the alcoholic mind comes in, and usually, in my experience, drunken thinking, drunken speaking, and drunken behavior comes in before any drink or drugs, right? And that is a definition of alcoholism, right? And that's what I call untreated alcoholism. you know, where I'm not treating my alcoholism, you know. And it's a very complex topic, the peculiar mental twist, you know, and you hear persons come back into the rooms and they say, oh, well, you know, I picked up again, it's because I'm powerless. Well, I'm sorry, you know, and obviously how I talk to persons that I'm working with is a matter of life and death for many of them. So I'm quite blunt, you know, no, you chose to pick up that first drink. You know, my experience has been that first one was always a choice. It was always a choice. And when I'd made that choice, I would not bring to mind the torment and the suffering and the humiliation and the poverty and the mental problems. I just wouldn't bring them to mind because I'd made the choice. See, these are very complex psychological things. But I think that's, at least that's how I see it today anyway. You know, some of the mysteries clarified there, that I'd made the decision to pick up again. So I'm not prepared to look at my consequences list or make phone calls or go to a meeting because I'd made that decision. You know, so what is the solution? Well, it's to be in the solution. I'll leave it with this. You know, I was working with a precious member recently, and on the day that they were doing a meeting, they were reading the literature with me, they were doing the step work, they were very happy and free. The very next day they chose not to do the work. Before tea time, they'd organised someone to beat up their partner. They'd chased their parents out of the house, and other chaos and drama. And it was a stark lesson, because we all learn every day is a school day in recovery. You know, I've learned new things this afternoon listening to you, Elizabeth, Jenny and Ashley, you know. And I was just reminded about how stark and how, you know, how real recovery is, and how stark a difference it is between light and darkness, you know, sobriety and drunkenness. And, you know, this person didn't drink or use on that second day, but boy, what a trouble they caused, you know. And so we have a solution, and we need to be persons that practice recovery. And I'll leave it there, and it is over to you, Jenny.
Thank you, Paul. Yes, I'm Jenny. I'm a recovered addict. Yeah, I mean, the part of the reading where it says, what sort of thinking dominates an alcoholic who repeats time after time the desperate experiment of the first drink? Friends who have reasoned with him after a spree which have brought him to the point of divorce or bankruptcy are mystified when he walks directly into a saloon. Why does he? What is he thinking? And that was me. You know, people would ask me, my family would ask me, why? Why have you done it again? Why, when you know what it does to me? Why have you done it? And it does, you know, it mystified me, you know, every time I did it, every time I knew that I was hurting my sons, because, I mean, my eldest son had stopped talking to me, he'd cut me out of his life altogether, cut me off from my grandchildren. My youngest son stayed with me out of pity because he was scared that I was going to die alone and not be found or be eaten by my cats. And those were real fears, you know. He honestly thought that that was how I was going to go. And he stayed around just because he felt a sense of duty to look after me. And how guilty that made me feel, because, you know, within weeks, days, I would be picking up a drug again. So, you know, it is how quickly we forget time after time of just a month or a week ago of how bad our using actually got. And I just repeated it time after time after time. And this book just helps me to know that I'm not alone. And when I come into the rooms and was introduced to other addicts, I realized that I really wasn't alone, and that there was people that, just like me, had done things to hurt their families too. And although it doesn't make it right, it does make me feel slightly better about it, that I wasn't the only one that was doing it. So yeah, I shall leave it there. Thank you.
Beautiful. Thanks for sharing, Jenny. Always great to hear you. Ashley, you want to come in for a minute or two?
Yeah, lovely, Paul. Thank you. Thanks for the reading. Yeah, I'm a recovered drug addict. You know, I mean, that's just, it sort of blew me away, I suppose, when I read that. Or what, you know, if someone, you know, if I read that and someone read it to me, you know, it says at the top there, at the bottom, sorry, the tragic truth is that if the man be a real alcoholic, the happy day may not arrive. And again, that's my experience. You know, I thought I could control what I was doing, and my family kind of wanted me to, and as much as I wanted my family to think that I had some kind of control over what I was doing, and what came sort of real to me was that I do have choices in recovery today, and I'm accountable for what I do. I can't say, "Oh, you've done that, that's why I'm using." That was the old thinking. But now the new thinking arises. Someone told me many years ago, well, not many years ago, probably a couple of years ago, when I was in, obviously still in recovery, and it kind of stuck out to me. And he said, "Don't tell me, show me." And I always used to tell people what I was doing and how I was doing it. And whether that everyone's different, but for me, I'm just I was at a place where if I'm showing someone what I'm doing around recovery, they're gonna think, oh, not that I'm wanting people's acceptance and reassurance, but it's what I'm doing and how I'm acting and how I'm kind of being with people and being kind and respectful and putting all the values that the 12-step movement has taught me, because I need to be like that, because that's the only way that I can get out of this deluded way of thinking, is just being kind to others and having some positivity around everyone that comes into contact with me. And I'll just leave it with this. And the thing that always used to stick out to me was, for reasons yet obscure, I've lost the power of choice in drink. Our so-called willpower becomes practically non-existent. We're unable at certain times, where it says at certain times, I can do it sometimes, but at a certain time, it just wasn't there. And, that's one of the reasons why I'm here today. But yeah, I'll leave it there. Thanks, Paul.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Ashley. Thank you. Elizabeth, over to you.
Thank you very much, Elizabeth. Recovering addict. That really stands out to me. That first drink when you go out, when you've been clean and sober for a while. It reminds me of in the big book, Fred, that put the drink down when he was 30 years old, at 25 years of not drinking, and he thought that he could pick up and drink like any normal person, and then he found himself puzzled and in hospital within a couple of months and dead within 4 years, and he had everything that money could buy, and yet he couldn't stop himself. Anyone that's an alcoholic or an addict, we are bodily and mentally different from the normal drinker or the normal user that can go out and do it socially, and then put it down. I think as an alcoholic that I had to come to the realization that I am selfish, I am self-centered, and I'm self-obsessed. And then that leaves me into sitting there in self-pity. When I go and pick up that drink, I believe that I do have that choice. But because I'm selfish and self-centered and I'm self-obsessed, I don't think about my family or my children or anybody else, because I want to do what makes me happy. And at the time, I think that that's to pick up. The fact that I'm bodily and mentally different from others means that, once I put something in, I've got a threefold illness. Some people call it a twofold illness. I believe it to be a threefold illness. I have this obsession of the mind. And once I start obsessing about a drink or a drug, it starts off a craving, the phenomenon of craving. And it's so strong, that phenomenon of craving. And then once I put one in me, I just genuinely cannot stop. It's almost like I've got a gremlin inside me that stays asleep. When I do meetings and service and unity and recovery, and I do what I'm told to do by my sponsor. But the moment I drop that out and I don't do prayer and I don't do meditation, I don't do what I'm meant to do, and my ego and my pride comes in, you know, and I think that I'm better, I think that I'm recovered, you know, and it's just one day at a time. It's contingent on my how fit I am spiritually, you know, and if I put 100% in, I get 100% out. You know, there's 24 hours in a day. And it's something that I tell women that I work with, you know, there's 24 hours in a day. When I was using, I used to think about how I was going to get the money to use if I wasn't using, and if I was using, when I was going to use again next. You know, it was a 24-hour a day thing, apart from when obviously I slept, which wasn't very often. I'd get enough sleep. And then, you know, if I've got 24 hours in a day and I put a meeting in for an hour, and then I do my prayer, my meditation, my gratitude list, what's that going to take me? 20 minutes, 30 minutes. I've got 22 hours left in the day, you know, and then everything that I've got today, that peace, the love that I have in my life. I have so much love today, you know, so much love. And as long as I continue to connect to my God of my understanding, as I said earlier, and be spiritually fit, then I won't be selfish. I won't be self-centered, and I won't be self-obsessed. And then I don't have to go out, and I don't have to, my ego and my pride don't have to take over. You know, I think of others first. I work with others. I reach out to others. And then, please God, one day at a time, I remain teachable, and I don't have to go out and pick up that first drink or drug, because it's the first one that does the damage. When I first come in and I heard that, one drink's never enough, and one drink's too much, and 1,000's never enough. I never understood it. When people said to me, it's that first drink that gets me drunk, or that first drug that gets me drugged, I couldn't understand it. You say, no, I need 10. You know, I need 10. But the point of the matter being is that if I don't go out and I don't pick up that first one, you know, then I can stay fit and well, and I can continue to help others with the knowledge that I've been given so freely, you know. It's a beautiful program, one day at a time. You know, we can stay free from alcohol and drugs, and there is a way out. I'm going to leave it there. Thank you ever so much for your time.
Thanks so much, Elizabeth. So we meet regularly. We're a society of men and women who meet regularly to help each other stay clean. If you're in Great Britain, if you was to go to that middle website at the top on the screen there, cocainanonymous.org.uk, you will get lots of really good information. You can read pamphlets about recovery. You can read about the steps. You can find out about lots of online Cocaine Anonymous meetings, and also face-to-face meetings. There are lots and lots of meetings. The ones in blue are on every single day. So these are Great British times that I'm giving you now. The Breakfast Club, top left, 7:30 every morning. Great Gratitude every morning, 9:30. Pop-up Recovery every morning, 10:30. We Can Recover is on at 2 p.m, 8 p.m, and 9:30 every day in that Zoom code 971-721-4725 every single day. In the middle of the screen there's a very healthy 24-hour, 7-day non-stop meeting that's always got over 150 folk on it, and it is very, very healthy, where it says 1-to-1 marathon, and it's constantly on. It's a very good meeting. There's 2 ladies meetings every day, 3 p.m. and 5 p.m. Over to the top right, Daily Reprieve has a meeting at 9:30. And of course, We Can Recover's on at 8:30, 8 p.m, and also a 9:30 meeting. Reaching Out is on every night at 11, and Tazana is every night at midnight. So we have a solution. There's lots of knowledge and information shared and experience around alcoholism and sobriety. So stay strong, family, stay connected. And, you know, I just want to go around and thank each and every one of you individually for your time, coming along to carry a message of faith, hope and courage for the still suffering addicts. So, Jenny, thank you so much for coming along tonight.
No, thank you, Paul. Thank you very much for allowing me to do this.
Always a pleasure to hear you. Ashley, thank you so much for coming along.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. Much appreciated, and thank you for the opportunity of letting me share. Thank you.
Excellent. Thanks, Ashley. And Elizabeth, thank you so much for your time tonight.
Thank you very much indeed, Ashley, for inviting me along. God bless you all. Thank you.
You're so welcome. Okay, family, stay strong, stay in the solution, stay connected. We'll be back soon with another podcast.